Okay, it's time to start painting our squares. So you want to make sure that you're working on newspaper. You'll need a paint palette with the primary color paint in it. You'll want to make sure that you have a water tub, and I forgot to bring one home, so I'm just using a cup of water. You'll want to have a medium-sized paintbrush and a small paintbrush. You'll want to be wearing an apron. You'll want to have some paper towels to dry your brush off on. So I grabbed that, and of course you'll want to have your squares. So those should be the primary things that you need to get started. So I'm going to start with my secondary one here, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how to start your painting. So we're going to go ahead and start with green as our starting color. So I'm going to rinse off my brush real well. I go ahead and dry it so I don't have any extra water on it. Start by taking your darkest color and mixing it into your lighter color. So we know the two primary colors that make green are yellow and blue, so I take a little bit of blue and I mix it in, and it's starting to change colors, but I know I don't have enough blue yet, so I take a little more, I stir it in. Now I'm starting to see a yellow-green color, which is great. If you happen to come across a color as you're color mixing, you can always go ahead and paint that in. But today, like I said, I'm just focusing on painting a few areas. So I go ahead and mix this, continue to mix till I get to more of a green color. Notice I'm just doing small amounts. The reason for that, if I take big amounts of paint, it would make a drastic color change, and then it's always harder to go in reverse. So if I made this too green, then I'd be needing twice as much yellow to take it back. So I'm going to keep mixing, and this to me looks like a pretty good green. Remember, you can always compare to your color wheel example, but to me this looks like a good green. I wanted to make sure it doesn't look like blue-green and it doesn't look like yellow-green, and to me that looks like green. So I'm going to start with my smallest brush first. Now remember some of the tips from the video. You want to work slowly. You want to make sure that you're just placing the tip of your brush against your paper. You're staying in the lines. I like to outline first and then go back in. So I'm starting here, and I usually start with the center shape, but the way I labeled this, it would be violet, so I'm going to start with green. So I can go over to the monochromatic example here in just a minute. So notice I'm working very slowly, staying right on that line. I'm not pressing the brush flat. Remember, some of the best advice I ever got as a student was to stop treating my paintbrush like a pencil. And it really does give you more control if you're just pressing the tip of the paintbrush to the paper. You also want to make sure that you don't have huge globs of paint on your brush, so you might notice that I take and kind of wipe off extra paint. That's so that I don't have too much paint on my brush. It's hard to control a lot of paint at once. And I might have made these spaces a little too narrow. Hopefully you have a little more space to work in on yours. And then I go ahead and I paint around the inside of the other line, making sure to take my time, go nice and slow so I don't have any drips or smudges. And all that I'm going to paint on this one are the green sections. I don't want to paint one color and then go into the color right next to it. What you will find if you do that is that the colors mix. So now I have it completely outlined. I can take my brush and fill in between my two outlines. I can work a little more quickly because I know my outlines are nice and neat, so now I'm just filling in. If you feel like it's a little too see-through, you can do another layer over it, or when it dries, come back and do a second layer. That's something you can do if your paint is looking transparent or see-through. Always adding a second layer of paint can really help with that. And that's the reason why we dry our brush off after we wash it out, so that we don't have that water in our brush to make our paint see-through. Remember, one of our criteria, we want our paint to be opaque or nice and solid in color, not see-through. So I go ahead and I paint that in, and that looks good. So now I'm going to move on to my next. Then I go to my monochromatic painting, and I set this off to the side to dry. I don't want to paint any more on this until all my green is dry, so I'm going to set that off to the side. And then on my monochromatic painting, I can go ahead and paint in the green sections.